Well, hello, my name is Benjamin Kohler, and this is the presentation from the Friendly Fire team for our application for the Camp Kudzu Diabetes Camp. Camp Kudzu is a youth camp for children living with type 1 diabetes. It differs from a normal camp in that clinicians and endocrinologists are available to assist with the diabetes management of the campers. Our task was to provide an application to help replace the current paper system in use at the campsite to make it easier for clinicians and endocrinologists to share and maintain the camper data. The main requirement is that the application would need to be effective even without reliable internet service. This slide shows each team member and their responsibilities during project development.
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, I'm Dylan Perry, and I'm going to talk about the tech stack and kind of take us into an MVP and take us into our first part of the demo. So our tech stack kind of had four parts, right? The bottom layer, the platform there is probably the one that everyone's most familiar with. It's the traditional HDAP stack, of course. So we have Docker and Kubernetes for container management, and Drone for the continuous integration, and then Rancher for kind of tying up the Kubernetes stuff all together. Our actual application is built with React on the front end. For those of you that don't know, React uses JSX, and it's like a componentized web architecture. It's pretty popular. And we also used PouchDB to kind of address that offline requirement that Ben just talked about. So PouchDB pairs with CouchDB, which is a database storage from Apache. And it's really just designed to provide a way for the web and the data store to kind of sync offline or whatever connections available. We also use some server-side technologies like Java and Spring and Tomcat, kind of your traditional API kind of layer, and that part was used for authentication and file retrieval and storing patients or campers into the database. Observations of their campers, such as their blood glucose levels and other things like that, and we wanted to make the application kind of smart, right? So we wanted to provide values and help the clinicians make calculations for the treatments of their campers. And with that, we can kind of go into the first, kind of talk about the first part of our demo. So this is how you would create a camper. Yeah, so this is kind of our landing page after you log in. So you would go here to the add new camper. We'll create one. We'll call it test camper. He'll be in cabin 3. The street address will be 111. We'll just say 111 Georgia Tech Avenue, Atlanta, Georgia, and then we'll do 55555 as a zip code. The home phone number will be 919-218. We'll mess up kind of like my number. You saw it pop up there. And this camper will have a pump, and it will be test pump will be the type. The insulin type will be the best insulin, and the basal rate will be step. So some of these patients, we have like different carb ratios that kind of determine their glucose treatments, right? They're their insulin treatments. And so the carb ratio and the correction factor are attributes of that. And so we needed a way for clinicians when they're adding a camper to include that information. And so a way to do that will be here. We'll say from 2:25 to, let's say, midnight. It'll be 7, and then we'll say from 12:01 a.m. until 2:24 p.m. It'll be 10. Then for the correction factor, we'll do a similar thing. We'll say from 2:25 until midnight. It'll be 5. And then from 12:01 a.m. to 2:24, it will be 9. And then we will submit. And that successfully creates a camper. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Angie to kind of show us how we'll navigate through the camper search.
So basically, we developed a camper search so that we could have a single source of truth for all campers in this application. So it supports campers imported from FHIR and then campers also created manually by a clinician. So right here we have some data imported We have the first name, the last name, and the cabin. And a use case that we saw was that we wanted clinicians to be able to filter campers by cabin. So if you go to the filter button, then you can filter, for example, by cabin 1. So then we just have Angelica and James, for example. So once you click on a camper, you'll be taken to this new view, and you could add an observation. You could look at their observation logs. You could look at their charts and then their medical profile. So for example, if we wanted to add an observation, we could do so through this form. And essentially, we take the blood glucose, subtract that by the target, and then divide that by the correction factor to get the insulin. So for example, the correction factor would have to be greater than negative. So we would just update that, fix the carb ratio, and then submit. So that's pretty much a quick overview of how our camper search into the observation view would work.
So I'm going to go over the charts real quick. So on the same camper profile page that Angie was just looking at, we have charts here where a clinician or a camp counselor would be able to go in here and select a specific amount, a range amount. So for example, I have 24 hours selected for the bolus, and you can go through and see the general timeline and the rates of fluctuation for specific campers. One thing that we'd like to extend in the future is being able to select multiple range types, multiple options, so that the camp counselors can go through and see a better range of data, so that they can have a better way of determining if someone is on track, and make sure that they're staying healthy during their time at the camp. And I think that's all I'm going to be sharing for the chart visualization. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mike.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the FHIR patient import feature that we have. So as Dylan mentioned before, we have a Java backend, Java microservice, which allows us to actually pull in existing FHIR patients and add them as campers. So this is the FHIR patient import screen. You can check off what campers you'd like to pull in, or what patients you would like to pull in. You can change the number of patients you see by altering this. And there's also built-in pagination. Takes a little bit of time to load, but it does load, just bear with me. You can select a few campers, a few patients that you'd like to pull in as campers. Click the submit button. It says that 3 campers were successfully imported. So now if we go back to the camper search screen, we should see Mary, Caro, and Peter. So you can see, I think this is the Peter I was looking at before. Mary's there, and Caro's here. And then you can go into their profiles and you see that their camper ID was pulled in, their camper name was pulled in. Some additional information will need to be updated manually. But that's about it for the FHIR patient import. In the future, we would like to add additional features like pulling in campers, allergens, as well as previous FHIR observations, such as bolus administered. And with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Daniel to finish out the presentation.
So to go over some of our challenges, the first and third bullet points kind of go together. We had a little bit of difficulty fitting FHIR into the requirements that were given by the sponsor, simply because of the amount of information that FHIR can provide is immense. And so being able to sift through that and figure out exactly how to get that data out and the relevant data, the domain knowledge there was a little bit more difficult than we anticipated. We also ran into some issues getting JSON Web Tokens set up to the offline environment. We thought JSON Web Tokens would fit the best because of the ability to set login times and reject login times on the client side. Unfortunately, it was a little bit more difficult to set up than we had anticipated. So in the future, we like to add another iteration to the current interactive charts that we showed before, especially showing like trending data. And then things such as the camber carb ratios, correction factors over time, etc. Like Mike had also pointed out, we like to import allergen data using the FHIR patient import. We'd really like to test this out more on mobile applications since it's a Wi-Fi restricted site. So we didn't have an opportunity to do that very well. Getting authentication working end to end, both with CouchDB and with the Java backend would be great. Along with testing out the mobile capabilities, we also like to test the offline first capabilities more thoroughly, make sure that CouchDB is delivering on what it promises. And we'd also like to add a calendar so that users can track the various events going on around the camp. Just make the app more of a single shop thing for both the counselors and endocrinologists and everyone. And with that, thank you for listening to our presentation.